to the U.S. Vet Wealth page. Cool. All right, we are live, and
I
that's
wasn't.
Trevor's favorite part.
I wasn't done dancing yet.
I know. We'll get a 60-second one. I've seen ones go for 2 minutes. So
Oh Jesus!
whatever you need, I think we can find a video clip. I just haven't looked for one yet, but no, it's fun to actually add all the bells and whistles we have here. But since we have 3 people on the screen today, we can't see all of it. But welcome my wife, an award-winning podcasting host of Holding Down the Fort, Jen Amos.
Yes, thanks for having me and inviting me very last minute so that I wasn't like camera ready.
Yeah.
Well, hey there.
That's what I do.
Well,
I show up for my team, so you're welcome.
Good. But no, but what we're doing, and I thought first, Trevor, we'd start out, and should have mentioned this before we went live, but I was like, hey, well, why don't we give a little context for those that are first listening to this or have actually been following along on the series so far. What's the idea here with this kind of military finance 2.0? It's about the personal finance. I mean, yeah, it's kind of our version of the 101 course, because I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but really you want to be speaking to basically yourself when you were first getting in the military, and stuff you wish somebody would have told you a little bit about how money works, but then with the 2.0 part, kind of tied into more of these modern strategies and opportunities and the flexibility and control piece that we talk about at US Vet Wealth. So can you give us a little purpose behind what you're putting together here?
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess you kind of hit the nail on the head. My vision with this whole thing was that I go back and talk to me 20 years ago and say, hey, like, here's how to not be a complete dummy with this stuff, right? I've said it before, like, I went on all these deployments. I came back, literally years of my life. I was 6 months on here back in the States, 6 months in Iraq, 6 months here, 6 months. I was doing that between Iraq and Afghanistan for years of my life. And I had so many times where I came back and I had $30,000 or $40,000 in the bank, and I could have really set myself up for success, and I didn't. And, I attribute that to two big things. One is I didn't know the things that I know now. And the other one is I didn't know anybody who could help me get started with any of that stuff. And I guess, at the time I was, focused on that, because that's, in the military, 90% of your life is your job, right? You have to cram the rest of your life into that other 10%. And I didn't have that mindset, right? It wasn't a big enough of a priority to me. And now I'm kind of reaping the consequences of that 20 years later. And, had I done all that stuff back then, I would have been in a much better position now. I would have had a lot more confidence going into my transition. And even today, I think I'd be in a lot better spot. So as I kind of learned a lot more about this stuff, I came to see that you had two groups of people, right? You had like the scientist, or I call them the scientists. When I was active duty, I was an instructor at the EOD training unit there at Fort Story, and I was in Nukes Division, Nuclear Hazards Division. So we would go out to the national labs where they actually built nukes, and we would learn from these scientists, the people who actually work on this stuff and do it. And I would go back and have to translate to all the other guys, like, hey, here's the stuff that's important, right? And I was able to do that with, subjects like nuclear physics and medical effects of ionizing radiation and all these complex things that, normally PhDs work on. I was able to go back and translate that stuff to other people who weren't subject matter experts in it, right? And, so I kind of apply that same ability, if you want to call it that, to personal finance. But what I see is you still have that same kind of concept. There's still the same environment here. You have people who work in the industry and work on this stuff and are really smart and know how, you know, finance works. And then, the same thing too, while I was going to these national labs and I'm like, oh, okay, here's all these PhDs who know how nuclear weapons work. And then I would go look and see these other crackpots who didn't really know the technical aspects of how the stuff worked. They're just out protesting that and saying like, "Oh, these, this is dangerous. This is bad." And I'm not saying that nuclear weapons are great, but I just noticed that there's a lot of people who are really loud and vocal about that stuff that have no idea what they're talking about. So when I transferred over to this kind of realm, personal finance, it was the same thing. You have these really smart people who understand like how money works and what are the right ways to do things. And then you also have these other people who are on talk shows and write books who are very vocal and loud who, you know, talk about, oh, I'm helping millions of people. I'm like, you're not. You're helping yourself. You're building a brand for yourself. And the stuff that you're teaching people isn't necessarily putting them in the best position that they could be in. And so I think about that and I'm like, all right, that's kind of what we're trying to do here is say, hey, I don't care what you're most likely to do. I don't care about human behavior because guess what? You can change behaviors, right? You're not going to change the way that money works just because you're more likely to do this instead of that. Um, Part of that is you have to know how money works. You have to know all the factors that are important in creating and building wealth in order to become a wealthy individual. Because I say this all the time. I don't care if you're a millionaire if you can't use any of the money, the net worth that you have, right? If if your house is paid off and you've got a bunch of money in your retirement account and you're only 50 years old, who cares? That's, you can't use the money that you used to pay your house off. And you also, the money that's sitting in your retirement account, you can't touch that without penalties and paying a bunch of taxes on it. So I think people need to go back and rethink, like, what does it mean to actually be wealthy?
No, man, awesome story. No, I think you mentioned that once in passing about your experience, working with the scientists or whatever, but I didn't hear you tie it together that way before. So that's a really good part of your story. Definitely want to add that to the persona of Trevor Maxwell, of course. But no, but you're totally spot on. Even with the quote unquote subject matter experts, we're coming to find out in this day and age, a lot of times that can backfire. And in our industry, the subject matter expertise of retirement planning, getting the average person through the monotony of American fixed income life into retirement, hoping that everything's just kind of worked out in our economy over so many years. Like planning for that based on a system that's been just been accepted for the last few decades isn't really all that hard anymore because you can automate it even if you want to do it that way. I think the hard part is changing the mindset thing we talked about a few episodes ago to say, oh, but what if I don't want to do that? What if there are other opportunities? Obviously, other people are doing stuff. Like, I don't understand. How do they start a podcast? How does this guy write a book? Like, that was me 4, 5, 6 years ago. It never computed in my head that I had anything else to offer. But it's exactly what you said. I just want to go back and tell myself something I wish, a couple things I wish somebody had told me about. And so, very cool. Thank you for sharing all that to kind of tell us how we got to here. Jen, did you want to add anything before we get into today's topic?
Well, I sure do. No, I was thinking a lot about your story, Trevor, and also my take on it is that the thing with subject matter experts is that they are typically focused on one message and one solution. You know, when you think about when you go to college and you get your PhD, you specialize in one thing, right? And you talk about that one thing. And my take on it is, you know, these subject matters are probably really, you know, obviously intelligent and everything when it comes to that one message, one solution. However, if that message doesn't align with what you actually want, you know, to not just take it as truth, to not just take it as the only solution, but to actually seek out other subject matter experts that maybe don't have as sexy looking of a mic as some of these, you know, big speakers get. And so, you know,
Look at this
it's
thing.
like, it's like I hear this so often. Like when I was living in San Diego, people would say, "Oh, the best Mexican foods were the hole in the walls." You know, you knew that was like the best Mexican food if it didn't have a sexy entrance and it was like really greasy inside, but the burritos were great. And I say that because sometimes what looks sexy or popular or well said doesn't always serve you. And so I think all of this is to say is that if you can take a minute and really evaluate the messages that you've been receiving and accepting as truth, to really look at that. And if that's not the case, like if you really feel like that doesn't align with who you are and what you really want, to seek out knowledge. And that's what we're here for at US Vet Wealth, is being able to provide you alternative solutions that may actually work better for you. So that's my thoughts.
I got to tell you, I absolutely agree about the food. Like my favorite burrito place in San Diego was a place called Hector's, right off of Rosecrans, behind the old Blockbuster
No.
in Point Loma. And I was really sad because the last time I went to San Diego a couple years ago was, you know, to teach some stuff to um, some new Navy chiefs. And the first thing I did when I got my rental car was drive over to where Hector's used to be, and it wasn't there anymore. And I was crushed. But, you know, kind of to echo on that, like what Scott was saying, like you have the kind of the big industry. You know, really, this is my interpretation of it. I don't think that we do anything different than what they do, except that we embrace innovation a lot earlier than they do. Because I do all the same things that CFP does. I just don't want to pay all the money that CFPs have to pay to go to marketing. Like that's, you know, that's kind of CFP was created because people had lost faith in the financial services industry, and they said, hey, we're going to create this certification. We're going to have an educational requirement and a board of standards and continuing education that they have to do. And people are going to have to pay us a bunch of money to get these marks, and we're just going to go out there and market it like crazy. And that's what CFP really is. It's a marketing tool. They have this process that you have to, you know, the thing is that process that they have to go through is very extensive. And I think unless it goes back to that mindset thing, if you're really ready to commit, because it's going to take several weeks to get through that entire process, you're not going to make it all the way through. I've seen it time and time again. People come to me with these binders that they have from CFPs, and it's got this 80-page report in there that's just from software that's, you know, designed to kick that 80-page report out. And people are like, I don't know, dude, look through this for me. I got to like page 5 or 6, and then I stopped reading it, and I've never read it again. And I'm like, yeah, you and probably the 50 other people that I've talked to.
Yeah. Well, when I joined the industry, I went under the wing of a CFP for a 30-year veteran who basically was just teaching me how to use Money Tree. That spat out all that 100 pages of graphs and pre-written text and some relevant information for predicting something decades away.
Yeah.
Which I came to realize, for being honest, while having all that education around how those that plan works is important based on the government regulations around stuff, it limits the opportunities. And so we need to know how things like, I think, moving into today's topic, good debt versus bad debt is so important to understand, because yes, on average, maybe we don't want to just go out and buy a bunch of TVs just because you can get it financed at the PX. And they advertise it somehow that's a good thing. But really, if you've read Rich Dad Poor Dad and in your 20s, how you got that, for me, that was the case. Like I got to my 20s before I understood, like, oh, there's a different way than what I've been told. How shocking.
Yeah.
It's so and yeah, I know that's part of the story there. So yeah, tell us what you wanted to chat about. And
Well, I think more than anything, good debt versus bad debt, the topic of today really is efficiency of your dollars and, just efficiency in your process. That's kind of like why we, adopted the asset map tool, right? I can do everything that a CFP can do with that tool that spits out maybe a 10-page report that somebody's actually able to understand a lot better. And it's got nicer pictures too. But really, for me, being efficient, right? If you don't have a lot of resources, you have to be efficient with the resources that you do have, right? Go play one of those, my kids play this game where they're like stranded on a desert island and they have to, build a raft and eat crabs. And it's funny because it's like at the beginning of the game, you have literally no resources and you have to go through and build all this stuff up to get to the point where you're like, okay, I've built this raft and I can, go to this next island and do more and more and more. And I was like, oh, okay, I see how that is. Like being efficient with the resources that you have now is the best way to put you in the spot where you want to be down the road. And I think that's where a lot of people go wrong is they go talk, get advice from these big TV and radio and personalities. And, those people aren't living in the same world as they are. And they end up being a lot less efficient with their resources because of the bad advice that they're getting from, I'm not saying it's all bad. I'm not saying I disagree with all of it, but on the whole, I think their message puts people on the wrong path. And so I guess really the best way to do it is I know Scott's going to cringe when I say this because it's kind of become like a cliche buzzword, whatever, financial independence, right? We both hate that term. We're like, there's got to be a better way out there, but that's what the one everybody uses is. And I think unfortunately people don't have a clear understanding of what that means. It doesn't mean that I have everything paid off because people that have all their stuff paid off, guess what? They can still go broke too. Really, what it means is I've accumulated enough assets that will provide me with passive income to the point where I don't need to work. I can still live off of the money that my money makes in order to pay all of my bills for me. Right. So that's what that really means. It doesn't mean I have my house paid off and I have my car paid off because, you're still going to have expenses that you're still going to have to pay for all the time. Really, you want to be at a spot where you have enough income to take care of all that stuff, even if you didn't go work at a job. That's what that really means. And the best way to do that is to start building early because if you're 20 years old and you're listening to this, the one thing you have a lot more of that I don't is time. There's kind of a rule of thumb out there of, every 10 years you wait to start saving, you have to save twice as much for twice as long in order to get the same result. So if I started saving $1,000 a month when I'm 20 years old, for even if I just save that for 10 years, that's going to put me in a lot better position than if I saved, when I waited till I was 30, I would have to save twice as much for twice as long to have the same result. It's insane. Like people don't think about that time as being a much bigger accumulation of wealth than not having a house payment or not having a car payment. That goes back to one of those tenets that we talked about of personal finance, paying yourself first, right? I don't care if my car's paid off because I could pay it off anytime I need to if I really have to, but I would rather keep that cash on hand. To me, but I used to think that way, and I paid off all these vehicles, and I was like, man, I have no there was no return on that investment for me other than I don't have a car payment. So, so I guess we could talk about that. What are the two things, right? The good debt and the bad debt. That was really kind of the point of the discussion today. Aside from being efficient with your dollars, let's talk about how you do that. So go ahead, Scott.
No, I was just saying, great. I think this is such an important topic. Just let me know if you want me to bring up some of those graphics that you sent over.
Yeah, I'll go through that. I'll do the math on it, right? I'm sure my wife's probably in her office laughing at me right now because I say do the math on it all the time. And she's probably laughing too because I tell people that all the time that she's probably laughing at me. So, all right, good debt, bad debt, right? If you go talk to some of the personalities, they'll be like, that's bull crap. It's bull pucky. There's no such thing as good debt. And that's just garbage. I don't really pay much mind to it because I know it's not true. So when we talk about bad debt, right? Those are the, I'm going to use debt to pay for a vacation or pay for jewelry or, credit cards. That's a big one too. That gets a lot of people. Those things usually have high interest rates. Any kind of those personal loans that don't have any collateral will have pretty high interest rates. Student loans, if you get them while you're still in school, a lot of those interest rates are higher. So you want to go back and refinance those after you've gotten a job and you've graduated. But that's the stuff that you don't really want to use if you don't have to. If you have to take out a loan to pay for a vacation, you shouldn't go on vacation, right? If you have to take out a loan to buy a piece of jewelry, that is a terrible idea. I would highly not recommend that. But once you do have it, what do? Right? There's two different types of ways of paying this stuff off. You've probably heard of the snowball versus the avalanche method. The snowball method is the one that's, it's got a little psychology behind it. They say, hey, pay off your smallest amounts first, because every time you pay off an amount, it's going to give you a little reward and it's going to motivate you to keep going. And that's, from a behavioral standpoint, that's going to make you happy. I don't know the science behind it. I haven't read the studies, but I know the one that makes more sense from a mathematical standpoint is the avalanche method. I'm going to pay off whichever one has the highest interest rate first, because that's the one that's working the hardest against me. The example I always like to use is, think about like you were James Bond in a movie and you had two Bond girls and they're both, sitting in a tank that's filling up with water that's got piranhas in it, right? Are you going to save the one that's in the tank that's getting filled up at a rate of 18%, or the one that's getting filled up at a rate of 12% first? Obviously, the math would dictate that you save the girl in the tank that's getting filled up at a rate of 18% first, because if you work on that 12% one over there, she's going to be dead by the time you get to her. So from a mathematical standpoint, you'll want to attack the highest interest rates first. Ultimately, here's one where I got to agree with some of the gurus. Like, the one that works for you is the right one. Whether or not it's the most efficient, that's an opportunity cost that you have to be willing to assume if you're going to go the other route. And then, the other thing, the good debt. People say, well, what is good debt? Good debt is you being able to leverage debt on high-priced assets like cars or houses or, education, in order to give yourself the opportunity to build assets on the side while you're paying those things off, right? I'll show a couple of examples here that I've made. But, the good thing about that is, you're not throwing cars are the one that I absolutely tell people do not pay cash for, unless it's like maybe it's a $2,000 beater. If you're not already a millionaire, you shouldn't be paying cash for this stuff, because you're never going to get to that status if you're always using your money to pay off cars and houses. Now, if it's investment properties, that's another story. That's another discussion for another day. But the thing is, if you're doing that, why would I use what's the term? Other people's money. Why would I use my own money to pay for something like that when I could put my own money to work for me off to the side, and then I can just use a little bit of my money over a long time to pay this stuff off? This is all circumstance dependent, but if you're 25 years old and you're trying to pay your house off right now, I've got some bad news for you. You are costing yourself a lot of opportunity to go out and build like actual wealth. Because, cars break down, people go out and buy new cars, people move, especially if you're in the military. The math isn't behind you on this one. I don't care what anybody says. The math is not behind you on this one. Now, that doesn't mean that you go out and buy like a brand new $40,000 or $50,000 car, right? The best way to also give yourself the opportunity to build and create wealth is to live within your means. And I've heard other people say this before: living well within your means gives you more opportunity. And I was like, okay, I like that, right? I don't have to go out and buy a $400,000 or $500,000 house, just like I don't have to go out and buy a $40,000 car. But if I do go out and buy that stuff, I'm not going to pay cash for it because I want to take my money and put it towards paying myself first. I want to go out and invest my money into something that's going to make me more money, not, either go into this building equity. Right. That's what good is equity if you're not using it. That's one of my biggest things about those people that, half their net worth is tied up in their house. It's paid off. I'm like, that's cool. What are you going to do with it now? Right. So I tell you what, Scott, you want to bring up those, one of those little slides that I made up?
Yeah. The car one or the house one?
Do the car one. This is one that really makes me mad, and I've made this mistake several times over the years. I just I don't know if it's hard to interpret this slide or not, but basically, I've been in that situation where I came back and I had a bunch of money just burning a hole in my pocket. And I was like, you know what, man, that truck that's a few years old. It's got a lot of miles on it. I think maybe I'd like to go get a new one. That traditional, Great Depression wisdom was pay cash for it because, that way you can, you don't have to worry about it anymore. Well, okay. One of the things about paying cash for a car is you can see right there, right? On average, you're going to get about 2/3 of that will be depreciated over the course of that loan. Average loan is about 6 years for a vehicle. Okay, well, what was my opportunity cost for that, right? If I would have taken that $30,000 and thrown it into something where it's making 7% compounding for 6 years, I'd have, a little over $45,000 in the bank, right? Whereas, if I went out and borrowed it, I got a 3% loan, simple math interest, over 6 years. The cost of that to me is about $2,800 to borrow somebody else's money so that now I can build assets with the big chunk of change that I have. The other option is, okay, I'm going to go out and I'm going to pay $30,000 in cash for this car. The first thing that happens after you drive it off the lot is it loses, 20% of its value right there. Over the course of time, that's going to depreciate. I'm going to lose about $20,000. That's what's happening to my money. The opportunity there is that I can take that car payment that I would have put towards paying the car and invest it. The problem is you're going to see, like, here's that big chunk of change making money up here. And now I'm slowly building back up to that amount over the course of 6 years. And even then, at the end of that 6 years, I'm still short by about $5,000. To me, I would have rather had access to that, $30,000 or $40,000 over the course of that 6 years than, throw it into the car and not have a car payment, because, I can always pay it off whenever I want if I've still got a lot of money in there working for me. instead of, working for somebody else.
Cool. Right on.
And I don't know. I know we're at the 30 minutes right now. I didn't know if you wanted to talk about, the house. That's another one that a lot of people have questions about. Maybe we could hit that up on another day.
Yeah. Why don't we? I think that was a lot of detail and a lot of perspective. But no, thanks for. I mean, this is obviously something to go into more detail in a lot of different scenarios. But just getting the idea out there of different types of debt and the way you can leverage it. I mean, that's how you create opportunity for yourself. So glad we're starting these types of conversations. But yeah, I think that's all we have for today. Thank you so much for those that have been joining us. And as we roll these out more, Trevor's got a lot of topics he's going to be hitting on. But if folks do have questions or have topics that they want us to hit on, happy to oblige. But,
yep. And I'll tell you this, I've probably made just about every mistake with money that somebody in the military can make. So I've put a lot of time and thought into this and figured out like what is the best way to do it.
Right. And that's the idea with these military finance 2.0 series is to reach that new to money and investing audience in our community, but make them aware of not just the standard path that they're going to get anyways if they're learning about this stuff. The more up to date they are into what's going on in the modern economy is going to benefit them. And so that's what this series of videos is mostly about, but I think it can benefit a lot of people just to get some ideas on things. Refreshers never hurt, right?
Yep. Constant learning.
Cool. But all right, well, off to another week. Can't believe we're at the end of April already, but the year's going by fast. Things are going well for everybody. We've got a lot going on here with our books coming out. Jen, anything you want to announce or chat about before we sign off?
Yeah, I mean, I was just thinking about just reflecting on everything you were sharing, Trevor, and we are talking to military families, and I know that we have mentioned one thing to keep in mind is that if you are a young military couple, you're probably gonna dismiss this. You're probably just gonna brush it off and be like, "Oh, that's good to know." But I'm young. I don't have kids yet. Like there's this whole mentality of like, "Oh, I can put it off." And also because the military life is so chaotic and you're constantly PCSing, you just put it off and put it off, put it off. And so, I'm just acknowledging the fact that you probably won't take this information. But if you do, if you see the value in your youth and know that, just like what Trevor was saying earlier, it's like, I wish he said he wished he knew this more when he was younger because he can accumulate wealth faster. If you are in that department, if you value your health and your youth today, to keep showing up to these conversations because we really are here to continue to give you the kind of alternative education that standard financial education and the financial industry and the military community as a whole don't really educate on. And so thank you all so much for listening. And it's better to do something than nothing. And if you are doing something, to continue to educate yourself on how you can do something better, or if you need to switch strategies. And again, that's what we're doing here at US Vet Wealth is really just giving you that education so that you can continue to make confident and informed decisions for yourself and your family, and that when transition comes, you're not a deer staring at headlights. So that's my last 2 cents I want to share. And then of course, my podcast show, Holding Down the Fort, is currently off season. But if you do want to, learn about it, they're coming back toward the end of spring for season 5, starting with episode 100. So feel free to subscribe before then. Website is holdingdownthefortpodcast.com.
And my website, my podcast, we've got a great episode today. Herb Thompson, the author of the book, The Transition Mission. It's probably, in my opinion, it's one of the better books about transitioning out of the military. But that should have dropped today at 12. So I'll make sure I throw the link up there on the Get to Vet LinkedIn page.
Awesome. Well, thank you both for your wisdom today. And for everybody else, we will see you on Wednesday at noon.
Have a good one.